And welcome back to the PPC. Finch here, joined by Fawn the legend. How you doing, man? As we're going to be heading into Brazil for this second set of the day. And the first set, after that very first Isominds map, things kind of got out of control a little bit there for 5 randoms. Are you expecting you're going to be seeing something similar here between Clarity and Fatal Ambition?
Yeah, I'm really interested to see these guys sort of play because Brazil is still the region it is that we haven't seen very much of. We've seen Brazilian players, we've seen people like Mittal, like Freeze God, like Ares that really are good at holding their own. But at the same time, overall as a region, it hasn't been proved too much. So I love seeing these guys play because they still stick with the tried and true, right? They stick with the 2 tank, 1 support, 2 DPS, right? So I'm interested to see how they're going to be playing throughout the day for sure.
Yeah, I want to see those drafts as well. You can tell Fatal Ambition and Clarity, maybe not up near the top, but relatively within striking distance, at least for Fatal Ambition. And you heard Kresnik talk a little bit about this towards the end of set 1 there as well. Both of these teams are going through a little bit of roster shakeups, so perhaps we'll be seeing some different looks from them here today, especially up against one another. I expect it to be a relatively even match because they've been playing against some of those higher-end teams this whole time and struggling. Here is where one of these squads kind of has a chance to build a bit of momentum.
Right, and I truly believe for that to be the case as well. I mean, especially when you're starting off on a map like Stone Keep too. I mean, like this is sort of the like the dust, right, of Paladins, where it's a map it is that everybody knows and everyone wants to consistently go back to because of the fact that it's just been played so much, right? So you know all the spots, you know the call outs. So for this to be the starting map, especially with these 2 teams, I'm excited to see them play for sure.
Should be fairly heads up, so to speak, right, when we're on Stone Keep in particular, right? It's something where you shouldn't expect any kind of big surprise or anything like that happening for any of these rosters. Well, what about in terms of these actual champion picks here, Fun? I mean, we have seen a lot of IO getting banned out, but what we saw in that first set was that right now these really high mobility flankers feel like they make things a little bit tough for the opposite team. They force you to take fights that you probably can't win. They take those favorable 2-on-1s, and once they get that trade, they start to move in. Is that the same way you're expecting to play here in Brazil?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, the thing is that I said it before about the fact that the Brazilian players typically stick to the tried and true, right? The things it was that people were doing last year with the 2 tanks, the 1 support, the 2 DPS still can come to fruition here. Except the thing is that, like you said, we'll probably see some of those more higher mobility characters. I mean, I've seen Zhin being pulled off on this map before. Maybe not so much as Koga, but I've seen Zhin's typically playing around that church, typically trying to be up and around, like at least by Banana, up near the Heaven area. Like it really truly depends. At the end of the day, right, we can speculate as much as we want, but when it comes down to it, we'll have to see exactly what it is they're going to go for. And Jenos seems to be a pretty good pick too.
They're going to take it here first overall on the side of Clarity. I mean, we saw a big through time and space in that last map really help turning things around. We'll see if that happens here again. Notably, IO not banned. It was Talus, Eevee, BK, and Vivian, which means that Fatal Ambition get to lock that down. Plant Luna on the point here, Fawn, and potentially build up a lot of free percentage. And they're pairing it with the Khan. Not a bad start here for Fatal Ambition.
No, not at all. I mean, we've seen it so consistently throughout last year and even still into this year, which is what's so surprising, especially with all the changes to Season 3. IO just being able to put that Luna on point is just going to enable them a lot of cap time and make sure that they have a lot of their teams just firing on all cylinders. Vivian gets banned, and so does Talus, but that leaves Viktor open, and you have Raum as well. So that's going to be problematic for them. He's going to be wreaking havoc a lot in the back line, can pretty much run all the way to the back line, get a little bit of damage, heal himself back up, and make it right back to the point where he can try and contest for it. But Buck is still pretty high mobility too. That's really good to be able to see him try and sit, pretty much jumping right into the back line and really wreak havoc on this Jenos and Viktor, who are going to be pretty much sitting back there and really not doing much of anything except for trying to find those sight lines and make sure they can do as much damage as possible.
Yeah, and they're going to add the Tyra to that too, so that is plenty of damage here from Fatal Ambition. For me, though, on Clarity, it's sort of a question. I'm wondering on where this Void Grip's going to be coming out, right? Is that something for this Khan, so you can burn him down? Is he saving it for that Buck, but he's diving into backline as well? How many heads are going to be turning back to try and help him out? It looks like it is going to be the double front line, at least from Clarity. They've got the Raum and the Ashe, and Raum can really be free to kind of run loose in a world where maybe they're leaving this sort of Ashe behind. Is that what you're expecting here, too? They're going to let this Raum do a lot of that more diving work, that sort of off-tank flank role here?
Me personally, I could see that being a lot more of the case. Raum can hold a lot of stuff on his own. His pretty much almost 2 health bars worth of health and damage it is that you have to be able to dump out to him. But that's why I feel like they picked that Tyra and that Cassie. I mean, you've got Burn Monster to be able to cripple him, stop that sprint. Jenos is probably going to save the Void Grip for the buck in case he dives in on the back line. Cassie for that big game as well can shred Raum really, really badly. And Khan, but picking Ashe into Khan, that's great and all, but I mean, when you have assert dominance, being used, if you get tossed out of that ring, it's got to be a problem.
Well, we shall be moving on to game 1. The Spawn already covered. It's going to be Stone Keith. You know it, you love it. We've all been here plenty of times before, so it's fitting that we'll be opening up this Brazilian set here on what can feel like at times neutral ground that everyone's plenty comfortable with. And finally, we already talked a bit about how Brazil, we might expect to see them come back towards those more traditional drafts that look like the case, right? It's the double front line, right, for sure, on the side of Team Clarity. Fatal Ambition, they're leaving it a little bit more to Khan, but when you consider that Luna's handling a lot of those point duties for them, you drop her there, then this Khan can be a bit more free to rotate around the map. So we kind of are seeing that same thing for both of these drafts.
Yeah, and that's exactly why you see 4 of them already on the side of Team Clarity, starting off with Bulldozer, right? They know what the plan is for Fatal Ambition, and they prepared accordingly for that. Starting out with some of the, in Raum's case, you got the Chronos, but you also have the Cauterize and the Bulldozer from their damage dealers, right? And even Bulldozer from their tanks. And just like it is that we were talking about before, they're already moving up into heaven and trying to keep the pressure on, but it seems like the fight's already started.
Yeah, it's going to be a big keep fight to try and start this off. And
nice.
Barinoo comes out on top. They take care of the Raum early on in this one. Fatal Ambition already have the numbers advantage. They've already got the percent lead to 48 and climbing as Luna continues to control. I think each team sent about 1 person church, but not a whole lot came from that fight too. Fatal Ambition get 1 clean pick, and suddenly they seem to be in control. The Luna finally taken care of, so no free capping for Fatal Ambition right now, but Clarity's going to need to find someone who can step out on their own. They finally drop 1 member down onto the actual midpoint to try and fight off, but they're forced to give it up too. That's the Tyra that makes it a little bit too hot to stand there, as RCSoldier does get 1 kill.
Yeah, exactly. And Luna gets right back on the point, exactly as we were expecting her to be doing, right? Just making sure that she sits on that point, puts up as much contest time or as much point percentage as she can. But that's what I was mentioning before. You have the Burn Monster that gets thrown out, but you have Raum just running through everybody, man.
Finally, Clarity able to come on top of a fight. RCSoldier finds himself a double, and the zone is on. Luna does you no good here now, as Team Clarity not only up to 81%, but from this position should very likely be able to get this capture. Somehow, 1 member's made it all the way to the back. That was not PS1 on the buck that made his way there, but Clarity answered him nicely. The Void Grip locks him down, and now they can start to get in position for this push.
Yeah, they were pretty much doing what you should be doing on this map, right? Make sure you put Luna on point and pretty much just sit there, but at the same time, Clarity realized, wait, if we kill her if we just kill her first, it's not going to be as much of a problem, right? You have all these ultimates being used, but I mean, at the same time, Clarity are still sort of in the one's position despite Fatal Ambition just now grabbing it back.
Yeah, this is big for Ambition. They're going to stall this push out a little bit here for Clarity. Headed come up big for them in that team fight, too, finding a double and really slowing them down. So now the question becomes, how can Team Clarity sort of reestablish themselves and cut through this potent defense on the side of Fatal Ambition? Well, hey, this is not a bad way to do it, finding a couple of kills, but it's not going to be them. It's the Viktor that comes out on top. RCSoldier gets the second. They force their way all the way back to the actual payload so they can hopefully start pushing it, but Clarity now back in the driver's seat and can get this payload rocking and rolling. A double for Soldier, and Fatal Ambition got to get reset as Soldier wants to get up to this high ground. There it is. Now he's up here. They can start shutting down Kong.
Yeah, they had tried their best with moving up and getting a zone going, but just like I said, that bug tries to jump into the back line, and you immediately get Void Grip, and it's hard to do anything at that point, right? That's your only movement ability. Even with recovery, you probably have bulk up to give yourself a little bit of more DR, a little bit more damage reduction, but even still, that's hard to do when you've got like 4 people looking at you, right? So it doesn't matter how much that damage reduction is, at the end of the day, you're still going to get taken out.
divinö has already used the dash, but another kill is this time it's the Cassie that drops. Nice. There's the overpower, grabbing him, pulls him back in for an easy kill. That should make this push that much harder. Luna buys a little bit of time, even finds a stun down there as they've recognized there's one more member stuck in the killing feed. That was RCSoldier and the Koga. They're able to get the nice kill onto, and things that looked good for a moment there for Team Clarity have now started to evaporate. Fatal Ambition right back out on the defense, pushing a bit beyond this final choke point, finding a bit of breathing room.
Yeah, that early overpower was really, really good, but it's not going to mean anything if they're still able to keep the pressure going, right? That's why they got that bulldozer early. They're still being able to melt down Luna, which is what it is that really Fatal Ambition have to worry about. They've got that pick, but they're already back on point. Very, very little chance for them to actually try and stop them from pushing it in as well.
Yeah, this very last Vindo stuck in the middle, and this Cassie will end up falling. Some time being bought, though, by this Tyra as the dash comes out from divinö. He wants to keep this push rolling too. Sets up for Mika to get a double kill on the Viktor. I like the idea from Cools to try and make that be gone happen, but he ends up being gobbled, as does the Khan. Does manage to throw him back, but that's enough for Clarity to find the conversion, a 2-0 to start things off.
Yeah, very convincing from them. At first, it was like Fatal Ambition had really started to have control of the early game, and then you saw, wait, that these guys have like 4 bulldozers, right? That doesn't mean that it's not going to really do anything. They actually end up pretty much burning that Luna off a point, and when they sort of put that prioritization on her, when she's gone, you see that Fatal Ambition's plan starts to sort of fall apart. It's Khan can deal with Ashe, but both dealing with a Raum and an Ashe is a different story. You got Koga for pretty much verticality, or just making sure that he can put pressure on on Khan from any angle, and that's what's so dangerous about Team Clarity's comp, right? You have these, like, you have pretty much Tenacious 5, which is what you're expecting, but everything else as well is pretty much standard for Koga, and it just makes it overall hard for them to try and fight back when Luna's gone.
Let's see if the fight looks the same with 4 caught 2s coming in for Fatal Ambition this time. The Bulldozers largely upgraded that second rank for Clarity here as well, so they should be able to chew through Luna well. The keep fight high ground favoring Mika, as he's already putting in decent damage. They've lost divinö early on. It's PS1 that gets that kill credit, so they have to fall back. 35% in climbing Fatal Ambition, but they've lost the lone center control for now, pushing the buck back. RCSoldier gets another kill into the Cassie way in the back line too, so maybe Team Clarity could turn this into a numbers advantage. After all, suddenly the flank coming out of the buck, he drops down, so it is headed, and Mika continues the rampage, even finding shots to the Khan inside keep still, and Clarity regained control of mid.
Yeah, this is exactly what we saw last time, right? Where Fatal Ambition are the first one as the touch point, but then it just sort of falls apart once Luna is gone, right? But in this case, it's a little bit different because they got that first pick. They got the first pick it was that they really needed, right? They saw that buck, Mika just going around on a tear, just killing off multiple ones of these targets, or at least lowering them so his teammates can get the last hits. Just makes it hard for Fatal Ambition to try and fight back when really their only point presence is Luna.
It's the disengage. The barrage was pulled down, but I don't believe and a whole other shot still came out from him. He saw some ult charge left as he works together with RCSoldier, get another kill. It's 90% now for Team Clarity, and they're stepping back on for a little bit more. RCSoldier holding it. That forces the Khan to drop down, and they bury him the second that he comes out. Now we're in overtime. They get rid of the Luna, the last one that was contesting, and who else is brave enough to try and throw their feet to the ground here in the ring? It's no one else. Clarity get the Void Grip to prevent Cool from finding that last touch, and now it is 3-0 here on Stone Keep.
Yeah, I'm just watching this Raum just holding down that left click and sprinting like a linebacker, right? Just running everybody over. It's so hard to be able to try and deal with that when you were really scrambling at the last minute to try and get that point contestation, and they just weren't able to find it. They've got 3 ultimates, so that can sort of be their way of fighting back, but at the same time, it's like Team Clarity, once they gain that momentum, it is so hard for them to try and fight back against this double tank, man.
And the Raum does manage to survive. Meanwhile, RCSoldier has gotten way up beyond the payload and found some decent angles. The Raum does finally get burned down. It was headed that got the double as he takes down iRoobsoN as well for his second kill of that little engagement. RCSoldier nearly wanted to make it a third as the Koga just barely gets around the corner. Even trades with PS1. Cools works together with headëd to finally get that last shot. So the Clarity have to stall out for just a moment, but they bought a ton of ground with that initial push. Still have the barrage in the back pocket and a couple ultimates near fully charged up for this push if they're willing to commit.
Yeah, don't really have the time to actually move up and sort of get that zone going. They're just holding their positions as best as they can. You don't want to move too far and get picked, especially not when the cart's just steadily moving that close, right? You have all these people just watching these different sidelines and making sure that Team Clarity can't get back in or be as effective as they have before. But even still, it's like every kill it is that Fatal Ambition get, Team Clarity almost trade that 1-for-1, and that's why that momentum hasn't stopped. They're trading even for most of these fights.
Yeah, if not better. Barinoo finally starting to get aggressive. Can't quite find the ground, but I imagine he was looking for. So he regroups and heads back. RC, though, wants to hunt down the low HP target. Instead, he'll be met with the Tyra, who's been a thorn in their side all game. But Pénny and divinö win their fights elsewhere, so that means RCSoldier can step on the gas a bit. And now where can headëd go? Just right back into the killing zone with RCSoldier, who gets another. The Khan does manage to lock him down for a moment, prevent the DPS, but the rest of the team keeps on pushing. divinö turns around to put in the last bit of necessary damage. The buck comes out, and the buck goes down. PS1 barely got to stand. Team Clarity with a 4-0 sweep on Stone Keep.
Yeah, that's when you just dust your hands off. You go, all right, boys, next game. Just on to the next one, right? Like, we don't need to talk about that one. That was a little bit too aggressive for our liking. But yeah, I mean, that's why it's so interesting seeing this sort of clash of styles here, right? We've seen the double support, we've seen the triple DPS, right? We've seen one tank being that received 2 tanks, we've seen no tanks where it's just triple DPS and double support. But at the same time, those are typically good if the enemy team is mirroring that, right? In this case, they weren't. They had 2 frontliners. I mean, it was a lot of damage they had to try and go through. They had their support, they had their frontline presence, and it was just too much in the face of just one Luna when 4 people are prioritizing Bulldozer earlier on in the game. I mean, I don't know what else it is you can do about that.
Yeah, and I think that the other piece that's missing from this font is that typically when you have these Luna comps, the triple DPS has a ton of pressure, so everyone can't just sit around with their bulldozers devastating Luna all game, right? Even if you build them. I mean, everyone was like, yeah, just build bulldoze. But they don't have that same pressure coming because they don't have all these extra flankers. The buck did virtually nothing for them this game. headëd had a ton of damage for them on that Tyra, but I don't think that it was enough. Clarity were able to buy too much space with divinö on this Raum in particular. That meant that their damage dealers couldn't sort of create that extra space for Luna to thrive in, and Team Clarity gobbled them up.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was saying just in general, was that having that Raum presence, which is why he started off Kronos in the very beginning, is because it's so hard to try and deal with them when you don't really have a lot of frontliners to try and take that. That's why I mentioned that Khan against Ashe, yeah, that's a winning matchup, but Khan against both, like 2 frontliners, having to deal with Raum and having to deal with Ashe, that's a little bit too much. He counters one, but trying to deal with both of them is just too much.
Looks like we'll be seeing Jaguar Falls here, I believe, just brought back in with this current map rotation. So we'll get our chance to see this here next for our second map. And much like Stone Keep, Jaguar Falls, right, feels like neutral ground for everyone, maybe even just sort of the banner map for Paladins. Though, I don't know, I always felt like it was Frog Isle, but I'm a bit newer here too. So I'm happy to join them here with Jaguar Falls. So Fatal will be in that first pick spot here after losing the very first map. And I don't know, the IO didn't look great, Fawn. I mean, on a map like Jaguar Falls, is it worth going back to the IO here again?
Not necessarily. You have a little bit too many areas that are just really closed off. A lot of these smaller spots can be really dangerous. At the same time, it also means that typically you can sort of have characters that lock down those smaller areas and try and protect that Luna, but at the same time, I feel like the composition they were running on Stone Keep with IO just wasn't enough to suffice. I don't think she was more so the problem, just like the overall composition of the team just made it harder for that Luna to really try and do anything.
Felt like they just didn't have enough pressure. One way to sort of help that would be to take the Raum out of the equation, right? divinö had, I think, 30,000 more damage taken than the next closest person, something along those lines. He was just a beast on the front line there for them, so they're going to take that out of the equation. Then they're going to add in the Bomb King. And Bomb King, in terms of your DPS, is about as high as it gets. Do you like this first overall, Fawn?
Yeah, I really do like this a lot. I mean, you have a lot of that blast damage, and closing off those areas, you throw out the Grumpy Bomb, it's a lot harder to try and move in and try and rotate when you're stunned for like a certain amount of time, right? That means that resilience might have to be the move for them to try and build on Team Clarity. But at the same time, you do have the Jenos and Viktor, though. That's a lot of power to be able to try and stop. Jenos is probably going to go Luminary, so that Viktor being that damage amp is going to be really important. The IO drafted again. Let's see if they try and make this a little bit better this time in terms of composition.
Well, they know that Clarity are willing to stack up all the bulldozers and burn it down. So, wow, they're largely running it back. They want the Tyra here again as well. And headëd played it well. I think he's about the only one finishing off those kills for them successfully. So I don't hate coming back to this pick here for them, but they've got to do something to try and create a little bit more of that pressure. And I wonder if Bomb King is that pick there for them. It's much harder for everyone to feel comfortable kind of sitting back and burning Luna when you're constantly worrying about these grumpy bombs and the like kind of raining down on.
Yeah, it is a little bit more difficult to think about that. Tyra last time didn't exactly run the burn monster like I was expecting her to try and stop that Raum, so he was just really just not even worried about a lot of the pressure it was that he could have created in that situation. He was just making sure they dove the back line. But since he's out of the game this time around, they're still opting to go for the IO and the Bomb King. The Tyra, and then you finish that off with a Barik. That's a lot of staying power. You have that Dome Shield to really just lock down that point, and this is more so a character I would be expecting to see try and help that Luna in case you need to be able to. Oh yes. Okay.
Let's go.
All right, easily best draft anyway. All right. Fatal Ambition. They already won. I don't even need to do my job anymore. Okay. We're good.
They locked in Moji. I mean, how could things go wrong? And Jack Falls, I feel like is where the map where Moji can do well, right? I mean, if she's able to get close, her damage does at times feel hard to beat. And the Fernando here for Team Clarity. So okay, we're digging a little bit deeper into the bag here than normal with these last two picks.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, of course. All right. So chair 2 time, Moji trying to go off on her. So the thing is that with Jag Falls, you have a lot of those close off spaces, right? A lot of the time that Moji actually loses, Maeve actually has a lot of time. It has an easier time dealing with her. In more of those open maps, you try and pick her really anywhere else. Moji and Jag Falls, though, that's a lot of places you have to be careful of.
She could potentially pounce out and grab it in these spots. The Fernando rounded the draft out as well. So we'll see if he will indeed fall yet, amigos, or not. We'll have our chance to find out. It is Jag Falls for our map number 2. And that first one, man, that heavily favored Team Clarity. So if I'm on the side of Fatal Ambition, then just sort of for my own sake, I would want to try and keep this game. I would want to try and keep this close, just so that you know that you're still even here with them. I did mention that it was headëd who had a great game on that Tyra. Maybe he'd be back on it, but that's not the case. They put headëd on the Moji here instead, so maybe he can keep that momentum going.
Maybe. I mean, we'll have to see. Well, I shouldn't even say we have to see, right? I already know she's going to pop off, right? That's about as much confidence as it is that I have on Fatal Ambition's side. But Team Clarity, man, I mean, you got to be careful still with a lot of this high octane and pressure and damage that you have. You got to watch out for the Immortal that Fernando has. You got to watch out for the Assert Dominance. They can gain a lot of space, especially in these choke points, too. But First Blood already on Fatal Ambition's side.
Yeah, it's a double kill to open things up here for the Bomb King. headëd gets another kill, make it a triple at this point as iRoobsoN falls as well, and a double for headëd. Okay, so you were right, it's this two-pronged attack from Fatal Ambition proving to be a bit too much here for Team Clarity to start things off.
You have characters like Koga and Viktor that try and pretty much, well, Koga obviously way more mobile than Viktor is, right? But it's all about the sidelines with Viktor, making sure you can pump out that consistent damage. When you have as much damage as both Bomb King and Moji, it's harder to deal with that. It's hard to deal with that whether you are Koga or whether you are Viktor or just anyone on Team Clarity's team. They get shut out pretty hard, especially when you're in these choke areas like this.
It's been difficult here for them so far, is what we were talking about in terms of having a bit more pressure, and it makes the Luna look that much better, and that's exactly what's been the case here. divinö does get one more kill, though. They finally able to shut down Vindo on this Bomb King and buy a little bit of room for the squad to breathe. Fatal Ambition still, for what it's worth, a bit pushed back, but they've gotten a decent amount out of this payload here early. But Clarity now a bit entrenched, more than entrenched, getting aggressive, forcing Barinoo to drop down the shield back, but they're going to dash in. But Mika stuffs it right away, gets the kill onto Cools, but they end up losing iRoobsoN for it on the Jenos. They get 2 as not PS1, so he can play the Tyra quite well too, getting a triple kill and starting to chew through. What is this from Clarity? This feels so much more fractured than we saw in map 1.
Yeah, I just think it's the AoE damage, man. I mean, we've talked.
Sure.
I've talked a lot about the Bomb King and the Moji, but you also have to remember that Tyra with that firebomb is just so powerful, and that's exactly you are able to group up in these places, but you can't against them. You can't against the Bomb King. You can't against the Tyra. You saw that grenade launcher chunk so many people, followed by the headshots, man. I mean, they're able to control a lot of these side areas just so well because of how much damage they're able to spread between so many people at once.
I can't believe we don't see Bomb King more often somehow, man, because he does so much damage just like this. iRoobsoN can't escape PS1, puts in the last bit of damage necessary, but suddenly it's Fatal Ambition contesting. You could convince me that the names were flipped based on the way that map 1 went, but headëd will not slow down, and neither will Fatal Ambition. They close out that first one with a conversion for a 2-0 start.
Yeah, that is about how that is. I mean, I'd like at this point, it's hard to really try and talk about things from an analytical standpoint, right? I mean, it just went badly for Team Clarity. You have so much damage that they're able to spread out between so many different targets, especially with Fatal Ambition, not even using really a single ultimate. It's hard to try and do that. It's hard to try and stand on these points because you even saw it towards the end. divinö was there. He was on the Fernando trying to stand on point, but he had to deal with the firebomb from Tyra, but also have to make sure that he was blocking enough damage from the front, and he just wasn't able to stand there. It was just too much for them to handle.
And it's way less of the mobility that worked so well for Team Clarity that first time around. They're basically relying on soldiers. Vindo will be using the ultimate early on to try and drop divinö at the start, and it works perfectly. headëd gets the kill credit for it. And so headëd has found his way to Meek in the backline. They've been relying on the Viktor for all of his damage so far, and headëd cuts it off right away. He's found himself another backline fight up against RC Soldier, and he comes out ahead there. Maybe another as Pénny drops as well. This Moji popping off by all metrics.
We love to see it. That's all I can say about that one, right?
Yeah,
we really do love to see it. Yeah, we absolutely love to see it. I mean, it's not often that you see the Moji get brought out, but this is one of the maps it is that she gets brought out a lot, and something it is that she's known for. Another point capture by Fatal Ambition too. That's just it. I mean, I feel like I've said what I'm needed to say in this situation, right? They're just being zoned out so hard by so much damage. It's hard for them to try and really go in between so many different people when you have that damage at your side.
Yeah, nice try, Pénny, I suppose. Mika falls as well. It's a triple as iRoobsoN falls too, and now the Moji get a bit hungry. Here's the quadra kill as divinö falls as well. Bring the next one into the wood chipper as headëd can't be stopped at this point. An onslaught from this Fatal Ambition squad, and that feels like the difference to me. They're the aggressors. They're the ones putting pressure on the Team Clarity.
I've talked a lot about the DPS, but I actually want to bring up the Barik for a little bit too, because he's pushing with them the snack time as well. Oh my goodness, dude, that's it. That's the girl right there, dude. Making sure she pumps out so much damage. The Barik is also with them, providing that shielding and so much stopping power, dude. I mean, I blinked and this game was over.
Fatal Ambition with a nice 4-0 of their own, and so suddenly it's time for map 3. But let's try and take a bit of a zoom out approach there, because obviously the Moji had a ton of impact, but that was also just great ultimate usage from Fatal Ambition in the last fight too. They start that fight off with Vindo finding the Bomb King stun. That takes care of divinö early on in that fight. The Moji headëd got the kill credit for it. The second time when they were worried about divinö, it was the snack time on him to take him out of the fight early too. I think that once Fatal Ambition got that momentum, they played around their ultimates really well and were able to kind of fracture out Team Clarity.
Yeah, I mean, this is exactly, we're seeing it right here in the replay too. Just she was putting up so much pressure while that was happening, while she was diving that Viktor. Team Clarity tried to rotate around all the way to the back to try and put pressure on them, but what little they knew, when actually Moji just kills so many of your targets. The Bomb King did extremely well too, but the Moji is definitely the focus here, not just because I'm the one talking about it, even though I would love for that to be the case, right? But it's more so just the fact that she was just finding so many different openings and just putting pressure on the right targets when Clarity were trying to scramble for a sort of lead.
And Moji does have a lot of tools for taking care of these tanks, right? So a double tank composition on a map like this in particular, where there aren't a lot of ways for them to sort of get away from the Moji once she's closed in that gap, it can be difficult to deal with here, Fawn. So we're 1-1, 2 4-0s. This map was even, but not quite in the way that I guess we expected so far with this set overall. Give us a quick break, though. We're going to get everything ready here for this next map, and we'll be right back with you. Welcome back to the Paladins Pro Circuit. We are currently in Brazil, and it is currently a close set, though the individual maps have gone down 4-0 in either direction. Still Finch and Font here, and it's still Team Clarity up against Fatal Ambition. And just like we were expecting, this has gone back to fairly traditional compositions, the like sort of double tank, 2 DPS, 1 support frontline so far, but the team that has been the aggressor has been the team that's been in control here, Font.
Yeah, I mean, we saw it on Stonekeeper, we saw it on Jack Falls. Both teams at this point now stuck at a 1-1. I mean, of course, my girl Moji was able to be picked, so we stand that, honestly. Like, I don't really have anything else to say about the fact that she was able to tear it through on Jaguar Falls the last game. But even on Stonekeep, I mean, both of these teams have really just pretty much destroyed a lot of stuff, honestly. Like, when they've had the momentum, they've really pushed forward, and they've really made it work for them, for sure.
Yeah, I want to see some better adaptation from these teams mid-map a little bit more, because so far, kind of Plan A has just worked for whichever team that it was, right? On the first map, it was get aggressive, buy these bulldoze, burn the Luna out right away, and then we could be the ones with pressure. On map 2, it was this Moji kind of zooming around and burning up whoever got a little bit too close too quickly, and then again able to find some pressure. So as we head on to Splitstone here for map number 3, Fauna, and this is the kind of map where I feel like those pushes do stall out a little bit more often here as well. Getting around those choke points can be difficult. I expect we'll see a bit more back and forth here.
Right, exactly, yeah. Splitstone is a pretty wide map, so you see a lot of people, these fights really happening everywhere. You see it happening by the fidget spinners or by lava over on the side. There's a lot of places to fight high ground, but it's a lot harder to try and to typically steamroll, in my opinion, on this map because of the fact that it's so widespread. So it takes you a lot of time to get back and forth between the point and between everything. So you have a lot of defender's advantage in that case on Splitstone, a little bit more so than the other maps, in my opinion, when it gets down to the wire.
Well, the Vivian and the Eevee taken off the board here early on. So far, we've seen Fatal Ambition play a lot of the same stuff. The IO has been a part of it, and for the first time, Team Clarity say no. They take that one off the table and force Fatal Ambition to go a bit deeper into their bag of tricks if they want to try and find the win here. The Raum also being banned away by Fatal Ambition. Clarity played this one really well earlier on in the day, so I got no problems with them trying to take that one away from them.
Yeah, you get rid of Raum, you get rid of Eevee, the IO. I mean, we seen the fact that they drafted it twice, even after they lost, and Fatal really were just doing numbers with it, man. I mean, you get rid of that and the Vivian. It's just so Vivian has a lot of stopping power, and they actually lock in Viktor first on Team Clarity's side. They still want to be able to have that more direct damage, that more easily spread out damage, especially when you're looking at a situation like Barrage, as Ultimate coming through and just dealing a lot of damage on point, meaning a lot of people can't stand where they necessarily want to. And Inara and BK are going to be the response to Team Clarity's Viktor.
Yeah, the Bomb King was the other part of that two-pronged attack from Fatal Ambition on Frog, not Frog Isle, excuse me, but on Jaguar Falls, right? And those two together, it was too much sort of AoE damage. They were able to effectively prevent Clarity from grouping the way that I think that worked so effectively back on Stone Keep. So I wonder if we'll be seeing more of the same here from the Bomb King this time. His damage went largely unchecked. Clarity got to figure something out to slow it down this time.
Right, exactly. And this time, okay, all right, Hover's there again. I don't know if I entirely believe that. Just to be honest with you, you have the Inara. Yeah, okay, exactly. Yeah, I was like, there's no way. That's production, like trying to play a joke on me. I already know that it's not going to be Moji, not on Splitstone. It doesn't make much sense. But they actually go for the Maldamba that time around. That's just a lot of healing potential in Inara. Inara and Maldamba do so well together because of how much healing he can pump out in such a short amount of time between Mending Spirits and his Gourd when he throws it out. And you have Androxus too. That's actually a lot of they have some good direct damage, but they also having that Bomb King again is really, really important for sure.
I think it's a well-rounded draft from Fatal here, especially on a map like Splitstone. This Androxus can use that mobility pretty well, you know, especially right after a mid-fight to kind of get up and over the wall, maybe find some damage and make a push a little bit easier there for them, or find some retakes. A lot of options that's opened up to them with that Andy on their side. Meanwhile, Clarity are going to pick up the Ashe and the Ruckus. So it is double frontline, kind of, but a lot of that responsibility is going to fall down to Ashe. Ruckus on this map, though, he can get up and inside, and if you're trapped in there with him and a Hexafire or something like that, then I don't know if you're going to see the other side.
Interesting. So they actually decide to lock Strix in this situation, and you are right. Ruckus has a lot of pressure, and for that reason, that's why I wasn't expecting a Strix to be locked on Fatal Ambition's side.
They pick someone for him to dive, right? Like,
right, exactly. Yeah, he's just going to be sitting in that back line and trying to get as much damage off as possible. But even still, I don't typically agree with that against the Ruckus, man.
It could be tough, but if they're able to keep him comfortable back there, then obviously Strix can find tons of damage. But if he is under too much pressure, then he'll never find a way to convert. So map number 3 will be Splitstone, as we have said. And so far, it has been a tale of stomps. Both of these maps have gone down relatively quickly in one direction or the other. So will that be the case here on map 3? I got a feeling that if one team is going to win it handily, it's going to be the team that drafted Buck and Ruckus and Viktor all on one side, all getting amped up by this Jenos. They got plenty of damage.
Yeah, they do, and they have a plenty of dive potential too. That's part of the reason why Moji was so effective on the last map, right? Is because of the amount of pressure she was able to get in a lot of these choke points and just run people down because they had the Viktor at some of those more stationary targets. But I don't know, man. We'll have to see. First blood, though, already on the side of Fatal Ambition, gets picked off immediately. That buck is gone, dude.
That's huge because we already know that the Ruckus is not in position to try and force headed off of this positioning. So the Strix, largely unchecked up here, has been able to stay scoped basically the entirety of this map so far. And that makes things so much harder. Poke your head out, you end up getting sniped. What about you, Pénny? Try to have some fun? Nope, you get sniped. Fatal Ambition have 60% built up already onto this midpoint. And things aren't going to be getting any easier for Team Clarity. We thought this would be a ton of dive potential and aggression from them. Instead, they haven't even been able to start.
Yeah, this is super rough already. I mean, they got that first pick, and because of that, like you said, they had to stall back and wait a little bit longer. Nice snipe from Strix is going to leave him looking a little bit confused, man. I mean, it's hard for them to try and break this aggression, and it's because of the fact they keep getting picked off so soon.
Well, RCSoldier does get one good kill into Barinoo, but PS1 drops back down, shuts down divinö as well. Still getting plenty of backup from the sniper up top. Finally making their way back in is Pénny, but it's too little, too late. Fatal Ambition get this first cap, and this dive potential really never came through for Team Clarity, and Fatal Ambition were able to plant the Strix up top and just pump out the damage. Now they're able to step forward. What I meant before, when I mentioned the Androxus, not PS1 gets over to the other side, and can make sure there's no defensive positioning for Team Clarity.
Yeah, that's what's super interesting about all this. It's just the fact that it's able to really... It's both these teams have shown that once they have momentum, it is so hard to try and break free from that, especially when they have it so consistently, man. The Strix actually peeled back to help out that Andro super low. And they have not been able to break that momentum since that buck died first. RCSoldier went down to PS1. They have been struggling to try and reclaim everything as you see the bodies just dropping on Clarity's side.
Pénny does finally get back there and take care of headëd, and maybe without the constant pressure and stress of stepping into the sightline of this Strix, that can be the opportunity that Clarity needed, but the payload continues to rumble forward. The accursed arm is here in the back.
Oh, man.
Mika steps out. He ends up falling. The Buck does make it up there to shut him down finally, and the Ruckus can get to the back line to cause some problems there too, but now RCSoldier stuck in no man's land. He gets chewed up, and Fatal Ambition right back to rolling, but they've lost cools at this point here without that Dom, but maybe that slows them down, especially with the assert dominance in front of the payload. But Pénny shoulder bashes away. The payload can keep right on creeping forward. They finally slow it down, and Fatal Ambition have to regroup.
Yeah, it is so rough for them to try and regain control. They've actually got that BK pretty low, which is good for them because that forces them obviously to just sit there and wait, try and wait for the Maldamba healing. It stalls them for just a little bit, but not for very, very much longer. They're just putting on so much pressure, getting so many picks. That's actually, I believe, the first one that I've seen Team Clarity do. Now that Ruckus is in position, it might be a little bit easier for Clarity to try and win.
They are finally finding a decent fight. RCSoldier gets another kill in the window as well. They shut down the BK. And Clarity maybe are starting to see a little bit better the light at the end of the tunnel. They're even going to be able to catch Barinoo towards the tail end. Not be able to get this kill efficiently. divinö willing to start dashing forward to try and make sure that this kill ends up happening, but a lot of time being bought. And they come out, the victors do Fatal Ambition, so without divinö, maybe they can make this push continue to happen. They will find their touch, get into overtime, and all clumped up on the backside so that this Bomb King can find some decent damage, gets up to the high ground. Some decent damage on RCSoldier, but not enough to really write home about just yet. This is still Team Clarity's fight, but now without Pénny, that might change as the damage starts to come through. divinö has respawned, but he falls immediately as headëd is back and finding his snipes as well. They want to keep up the pressure, but the defender's advantage is a little bit too strong. Clarity have now held on successfully.
You know, that's why I mentioned that earlier. That defender's advantage is super strong and hard to deal with, especially on Splitstone, since you're literally right there at the point. When it starts getting down to the wire, it's harder to try and confirm those, especially if you have one person it is that's gone. In that case, it was the Inara. Their frontliner was gone, and they tried to hold onto the point for as long as they could until she got back, but it just didn't end up working out for them. They just pretty much just ended up losing the round, but it's still a 1-1, so of course it's still not anything too crazy. Featherweight to be expected. Featherweight 5, I should say, to be expected. Just really focus on that drifting healing, and he has a lot more focus on the nether step as well, so he can maneuver and rotate however he needs to.
For me, though, Fawn, I feel like this has got to be about getting to headed, right, on this Strix, finding some kind of way to make sure that he can't just get comfortable up top. I mean, he went unchecked really the entirety of that last mid-fight, and you've got all this mobility, you've got these flankers who can get back there with pressure. Shouldn't be allowing the Strix to do exactly that. Continue to pump out the damage to anyone who's daring to stick their head out. The dive is happening from divinö in the backline on that Ruckus underneath. RCSoldier was right there with them, and they get the double. This is what Clarity needed.
Yeah, this is exactly what they needed. They were able to get a nice through time and space that ended up with a double kill for RCSoldier, just like you had said. And that is going to be the start, of the change. That is the shift that you needed right there. It was still looking pretty rough because of the control it was that Team Clarity were trying to gain, especially since Ruckus uses that Hexafire so early on the low ground. It didn't end up finding the kill, but that through time and space definitely saved him, especially since headëd was still left unchecked. That through time and space was their opening that they needed.
The King Bomb ultimate, we heard that go off elsewhere. Looks as though not a whole lot came from a divinö. In fact, gets the kill onto headëd. Now it's the accursed arm that shall be coming out. But yet again, the pressure is there. So the dive worked. They didn't necessarily dive the Strix. They dove everything else, left the Strix alone. He had to retreat. And it's all worked out the same. Overtime now ticking in Clarity's favor. And they've got everybody zoned back out. The Damba trying to force his way through, but nothing there either. Clarity getting a much-needed capture. And finally, this set looking a bit like a back and forth.
Yeah, it's a lot more decide now since Clarity were able to get some early game kills. I mentioned it. I've said through time and space enough, but you already know that was what the case was. When they got that double, it just had Fatal Ambition had a hard time trying to reclaim that. Everyone was in their positions, and even they were finally able to get a kill on headëd. Both RCSoldier on the Buck and the Ruckus, just making sure they dove that high ground as soon as he got back and took him out. Now they're trying to gain control of mines too, and it's just hard for Fatal Ambition to try and regain control. Try to play up a little bit more, but it's just not enough.
Clarity found a 2-for-1 trade, make it 3-for-1. It does cost them divinö, but RCSoldier does not plan on stopping now. It's just the Androxus left. They send him all the way back to spawn. So even a little bit of extra payload time here now starting to rack up for Team Clarity as they inch closer to finding this conversion and tying things up at 2-2. So how did Fatal Ambition make it back out? What worked before has now turned to a bit of a choke point as Pénny was laying down fire, has to reposition, and Clarity had to regroup to make this last push happen.
Yeah, they are trying to. They wait a little bit longer for everybody to respawn so that way they can actually get their bearings and under through time and space. But it's not going to find anyone in that case. So headëd is able to at least get a good kill on Ash. This is just like the control it is that they have. He's just posted up in the back line near spawn, just firing and trying to pick off as many targets as possible. And this is still Defender's advantage, like I was talking about. It's so hard for them to try and break that line where they're already back in the fight just when they died a couple seconds ago.
And headëd able to find a couple of good kills there. That was the instrumental part, as you mentioned. He hits right back into the fight and is able to find a couple of good picks. So with 45 seconds left, Team Clarity certainly still have a shot at this conversion. They really only have the Hexafire, the Assert Dominance not too far away too, but how much of those do you really want to commit heading back into an even mid-fight on the backside is the question. Is once again, they had to find a way to stop headëd, who has posted up here in the backside of this actual spawn room and is keeping them at distance. The Buck jumps all the way through immediately into the crosshairs. Not a ton of damage coming out, but divinö has shut down PS1. Now the BK has made his way through Fatal Ambition, shuts down RCSoldier, and that might just be it for this push. Only 10 seconds left, Fawn. I don't even know if Team Clarity are going to try and force a big fight here.
I don't know either. They have the Assert Dominance and Hexafire, but I don't think they're going to try and use it. They might try and contest, give it one last hurrah. But I don't know if it's even going to work out like that. Actually, I mentioned the Assert Dominance. She actually went straight to the back line and managed to get it off. This might be a turning point.
Well, that was all set up because she got back there to headëd, finds the Assert Dominance, and sets up for the squad to start coming through. Mika gets another kill, and way in the back they shut down Barinoo. The Bomb King starting to make his way back out now, but the Buck gets up top and puts in the damage. A double for Pénny, and that's all on the back of that shoulder bash, getting to the back line and opening everything up.
Yeah, that was huge. That is exactly what you wanted in a situation like that. He just gets all the way through, immediate shoulder charge, boom, right to the back line, and the Assert Dominance comes through and it makes it, he just gets deleted in that instance. Like you said, all off of the back of that Assert Dominance, man. I mean, Ash able to create that space, even though they don't have the Assert Dominance coming into this round, that's a lot. You're at a 3-1, and that's a little bit spooky if you're Fatal Ambition, because that means you have to win the point fight. There's no ifs, ands, or buts.
Things have suddenly turned, haven't they? What felt like maybe a chance to come back into this next one at a 2-2 and feeling comfortable has instead now heavily favoring Team Clarity. We're on top here 3-1. How's this mid-fight going to go? I mean, will there be another miraculous Jenos ultimate here as a part of this one or not? It worked perfectly for them in that last mid-fight, but you can't count on that happening every time. They have the Hexafire, have the Buck Wild as well. So Clarity have plenty of tools, but they're playing patiently. Fatal Ambition got 31% to start with, and now they're going to wait and see where the overcommit comes from. divinö makes his way to the back line up top as well. He's looking for headëd, has the Hexafire for him, and basically drops it point blank. It does not get the kill, but it has forced them off their entrenched positions. So now he can join RCSoldier on the flank on the backside. I think this still worked exactly the way that they wanted to. Obviously, you prefer the kill, but this is just as good. They had to give up 62% to make it work, but now the dive onto the backline can happen as well, and headëd all alone ends up getting buried underneath the damage of Clarity with a chance to win it right here.
Very, very good rotation by Ruckus, man. I mean, it was so hard for them to try and get in. Strix had to change his position, and so did Maldon, but you zoned out too with that Hexafire, and you can't really do much else, especially when you have Buck pretty much running rampant on the side, dude. I mean, they were winning so many of these points fights off of these couple little picks, or really not even getting any kills. They're just able to zone out so many different targets, but still the point percentage is actually really close, and no way they actually got it.
Yeah, no one turned back to try and deal with this Inara that was on the point. They got a couple of kills there, so even though Clarity probably were winning the fight elsewhere in terms of how the trades were going, they couldn't quite keep track of the point. It was 3-1 also, so a little bit of that fast cap maybe catching Clarity off guard. Instead of us talking about a win screen here for Clarity, it's Fatal Ambition's turn to see what they can get on the backside.
Right, exactly. I mean, they really just have to back up. They have to wait and try and hold more of this high ground and really just try and make sure they're watching Shaft, which is exactly what it is that Strix seems to be doing right now. But at the same time, if that's going to be enough, we'll have to see. But it seems like it's working out for them for right now. They're able to get control back, just sort of wrestle it from Fatal Ambition. It's just, I mean, Team Clarity. It's just so much harder for them to try and do that.
Well, that was the aggressive zone from Team Clarity, now collapsing. Fatal Ambition can finally right the ship and get back onto offense. PS1 on the Andro will use that mobility to establish a bit of high ground, try and force a little bit of that defensive positioning away from Team Clarity, but now it's aggression from divinö as he makes his way into the back line. The last time we saw this with Clarity, it did work, even though he didn't initially get the kill. Can they make it work one more time? The answer is no, as Vindo shuts down RC with the Buck removed. That opens up a little bit more space with Fatal Ambition, but they lose their Bomb King for it in trade. Out comes the ulti from the Inara as well, and that will end up working. It's a double for PS1 at the Androxus, now starting to rear his ugly head. But just how much more can he find? They continue to stall the payload movement. Dombo will die on the point to stall it out a bit, but Fatal Ambition had to fully fall back.
Yeah, so Team Clarity definitely getting the breath of fresh air that they may have needed. It seemed like they were almost being smothered by Fatal Ambition's aggression, but they were able to get a couple picks and make sure that they were able to fight back. In this case, though, I would say that Fatal Ambition are just they're really just taking their time. They've got about 30 seconds left, so nothing too crazy is happening, especially since they're just trying to wait and find their opportunity to try and really pounce back. But we have iRoobsoN in the way with a 3-time in space. This could be huge if he ends up using it.
And divinö has once again gone to work on the high ground, taking care of PS1. divinö really has been a big difference maker for them on this Ruckus to chew up a lot of their offense time on Fatal Ambition. That aggressive zone did a lot of that too, so now just 3 seconds left to work with to try and find a conversion. I called the last one too soon, won't make the same mistake again, but divinö again has found his way to the back line, and this time he's locked down PS1 as well as headëd, takes care of the Strix early on, pulls 2 members back towards him. That has left Barinoo on an island on the actual payload, and Clarity find the defense.
Yeah, that is a great defense from Clarity. I mean, that was in that situation. I'll say it's a little bit off of the back of divinö just being able to rotate around and get that kill on headëd. Right, they're finding more of these opportunities to try and make sure that that sniper is a little bit more pressured. Viktor's at the top of the charts in terms of damage, though. That's super strong because of the fact that he's able to get off a lot of these barrages, just throwing out these grenades. Just so much direct damage is hard to do. Like the difference between him and Strix, that Strix has that invisibility, right? But you see that the Illuminate is being bought on RC's side. side because he wants to be able to make sure he can dive that. Viktor can just run away. That's literally one of his abilities, just run, sprint, just get out of that situation. You don't want to be dove in the back line. And even with the Andro, it's a lot harder to be able to try and do that when your target's just able to run to the safety of his team.
And it's full ultimates on deck here for Clarity 2 coming into this fight. The King Bomb comes out early, but Vindo dies immediately and gets nearly no value out of it. That's Mika that punishes him. divinö comes up to the high ground, and he's looking to find the kill to the Andro. Gets PS1 behind the wall. Now it's headëd, who does find the point-blank shot to at least slow this Ruckus down a bit, but the damage has already been done. Clarity at 48% building in their corner. Pénny does have to fall back. A little bit too much damage came his way, as now Barinoo is back out and onto the point, but a big fight for them to start things off.
Yeah, that was looking a little bit scary for Fatal Ambition, but they were able to wrestle control back, especially in a situation like this where it just seems overall hard to try and make a play when they're just living in your backline at this point. Clarity have found their opening. They're doing it a lot. And nice snipe out of the mid of the air, dude. That's that Call of Duty quickscope montage stuff, man.
Yeah, my man is in a comfortable position, and even with the Hexafire and that Assert Dominance still there for Team Clarity, they couldn't get up here to him. The overtime starting to tick down in Fatal Ambition's favor. Vindo gets 2 kills to clear the space back out, and suddenly it's 3-3 here on to Splitstone. So with Pénny dropping Fatal Ambition, get into position to try and push forward, find this conversion, and prevent another hectic mid-fight.
Yeah, this is already now. You already see that Inara even wants a piece, dude. She's moving up and making sure that she can create more and more space, just one after the other. They're just dropping at this point. I mean, this is the pressure it was they were able to create and the advantage they gained so much, because this is looking really, really scary for Team Clarity, man. I mean, they're all the way literally in their spawn. There's only a few characters that can move up that far. They actually kill her in midair with the Assert Dominance too. I mean, this is just too much control. I don't even know what to say at this point.
It's too much pressure. Team Clarity have been fully staggered basically the entirety of this defense. So with a full minute and 40 seconds to work with Fatal Ambition already approaching the final checkpoint, they'll take care of RCSoldier one more time. PS1 has the accursed arm up top. Not a lot of good targets here for him, but he does manage to find one anyway. Doesn't get the kill, but forces Mika all the way back. Now able to find another bit of decent positioning on the back to put in some damage to divinö and force him back into his spawn. And all the while, the payload continues to roll slowly forward. Another kill onto Pénny. It's been an onslaught from Fatal Ambition. The Hexafire from divinö gets shut down as well. Fatal Ambition have too much gas. RCSoldier can't do enough. Mika is still alive here on this payload and buying time, but Cool was still there, so that forces iRoobsoN to jump down. They finally bought some time on the side of Team Clarity with that defender's advantage, but all the while, Barinoo was here keeping this contest going. He'll finally drop, but Team Clarity have reestablished their defense.
What a fight towards the end, man. I mean, that was just so... It was close, man. I mean, it was really close. I don't really know how else to describe it in that situation. I mean, the Strix was low and so was the Maldamba. At first, it was just they started really gaining control, and that payload was inching ever so closer. But Team Clarity, I mean, just Mika on the Viktor, dude, able to get those 2 last hits at that case, just making sure he can actually take care of a couple of those characters is just going to be super important, especially when you get picks like this. Even though everybody's still on the point, they still have the numbers advantage, but it's going back and forth.
Yeah, divinö's getting aggressive again. He's the one that made this all possible. The Jenos, the last member here, trying to keep this fight going. Mika there with them, but that's enough for Fatal Ambition to be able to find the win, and that is huge for them because Clarity really looked like they were in control coming into Splitstone, but Fatal Ambition turned around on its head and improved to 2-1 here in the set.
Yeah, it was a really, this was probably the most back and forth game it was that we had seen in this current set, right? It was the fact that Team Clarity at first were struggling because they weren't able to get into the back line and make sure they took care of headëd on the Strix, but that changed like so suddenly. This back and forth of this constant to the point to where it goes down to a 3-3 is what's important here, but Fatal Ambition are the ones able to clutch it out. 19 and 13 on the Strix, dude. That's not the slash line I would have expected to see on that character. Not at all when you have to deal with a Ruckus and a Buck trying to kill you in the back line.
No, not bad. from headëd here this game. And I want to talk about that last mid-fight a bit more, Fawn, because in all honesty, Clarity kind of had the perfect start to what would eventually have been our final mid-fight that we saw. They're able to get up onto the high ground with divinö and make sure headëd couldn't have this positioning that had been dominating all game long, but it still was not enough for them to find that mid-fight turnaround win. It was just a simple oversight from Team Clarity on that midpoint in terms of how quickly it was being captured back that other direction, and it ends up really hurting them that they let that happen, and then Fatal Ambition were able to find the conversion and turn it into a map win.
Yeah, a lot of it was hard to deal with because of the fact that they weren't able to get rid of that Inara in the time that they wanted to. I mean, they just weren't able to really kill her like that. Like, headëd was able to get those nice shots exactly like that from up in that high ground, just putting on a lot of pressure around the map. But that Inara was pretty much able to soak up all that damage with the help of Maldamba, just make it so much harder for people to deal with.
It's good work from that Inara. I think that's why we're seeing it being prioritized so often, is that she is kind of untouched in terms of just independent time being able to be bought on that actual point. That's what we saw happen on Splitstone. So Fatal Ambition now in control. And we just saw a map go the full distance. We might see another go the full distance as it's Ice Mines, the next one up in the chamber for our map number 4. And this is one Fatal Ambition, or not Fatal Ambition, excuse me, but Clarity have got to win at this point. They're down 2-1 now with Fatal Ambition with a chance to claim the set.
Ice Mines has always been one of those maps where people try and slow it down on, right? A lot of these high-octane maps, these closer maps, even on Splitstone, you see that it can go back and forth and really have aggression back-to-back. But on Ice Mines, it's played a lot slower. This could be a deciding game for Fatal Ambition if they really get the advantage, because we've seen that both of these teams are really good at keeping that pressure going once they have momentum. And Ice Mines is one of those maps where if you have momentum, it is so hard to try and fight back and break.
Well, these bans continuing the way that we'd expect up until now. I love this Bomb King finally coming out from Clarity, not just because the Bomb King's been played well up until now by Fatal Ambition, but it's also, we're heading into Ice Mine, a map where Bomb King could do even better, I feel like, at times. So get that guy out of there, along with the Eevee and the Raum. Notably, though, IO available. I don't know if she's quite as valuable here on Ice Mines, but maybe something that might get looked at.
Could potentially be the case. I mean, I'm not too sure. We haven't really seen IO being locked in on Ice Mines a lot of the time. I mean, it's Luna the reason why people pick IO, right? That DR got a little bit almost of a hit taken to it, but at the same time, right? Yeah, right. Like, the DR is great. Of course, she's a healer, so she's going to be able to keep everybody up. But just as we were talking about her, mention her name and she shows up, right? I mean, it's that Luna, it's that point presence that you need on Ice Mines. If you have that aggression, it's so important, and especially if you can just sit Luna on point, the rest of you can just bum rush the other side of the team.
And they're going to pair that with the Talus. I believe that was Prosper Logic on Ice Mines earlier today who had the monster performance on this same pick. So we'll see if Fatal Ambition can run it back that same way, able to dive past what is normally such a bulky front line on the opposite side. Can Talus, I believe that's that unique value that sees him get picked here on this map.
Yeah, they do lock in the Jenos, which is good for them. That damage amp just so potent. I mean, having that Luminary with the Viktor, I mean, it's a combination that we've been seeing a lot throughout this set. They really just want to go in and keep the pressure going, just why they have that Luminary buff. But they've got Talus and Zhin. That's hard to deal with, especially when you have somebody that likes to sit in the back and just sit there for Viktor. Like that's hard to try and deal with both of those at once.
Yeah, we saw this same backline or sort of flank part of the DPS part of the composition struggle on Ice Mines earlier because they couldn't get past that front line to try and do their damage to the relevant targets. But I wonder if that's going to be the same issue here with Team Clarity. Depends on what front lines they try and pick to go alongside this Ashe. Tiberius picked up as additional DPS here for the squad, but if they leave Ashe to kind of handle all that frontline duty on her own, then I think the Talus and the Zhin wouldn't struggle at all. They'd probably be able to get past and deal really relevant damage without too much concern.
Potentially, yeah. I do agree with that, but they're actually trying to counter out the aggression, I believe, by just going the triple tank. They're just saying that they'll take their chances with having that Ashe just on the point trying to 1v1 that Barik, but they have the Strix again. This is a triple DPS versus triple DPS composition with Fatal Ambition, I believe personally, having more of the point presence just off of the Barik and Luna alone.
That's right. The Luna can kind of contest, and then Barik can be free to give an additional points that they're favored on those flank fights instead, right? That's where the IO becomes such a priority pick up against these compositions that are also relying on just one tank. For what it's worth, it's a single support alongside these tanks as well. So you move on to Ice Mines, potentially our final map of the set that is yet to be determined. As it's Fatal Ambition that are on set point. Team Clarity would need to force this one into a 5th map. And remember, against the IO, those bulldozers were picked up early and often. It looks like that's going to be the same case here. divinö, RCSoldier, and Mika both already picking it up.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be an interesting fight, trying to see how this unfolds against them. Really, I mean, it's just so important being able to have that aggression on both sides is really what you want to take away from that. Like it's just a lot of pressure to try and deal with, no matter who you are. If you're Fatal Ambition or Team Clarity, you have to deal with a lot of these high mobility flanks and a lot of damage coming out from so many people. But they're starting off with 4 bulldozers again, man. It's gonna make IO's life really, really hard for sure.
Gonna be difficult to try and make sure that Luna can still get all that point value. It's working. Initially, they got a little bit of the percent built off of, but not just the Luna that went down. It's IO herself. Mika pays for it, though, getting into the back line and finding that kill. It cost him his life. Barinoo's the one that capitalized on it. Vindo had the great game on the Bomb King last time. Continues it on the Zhin as they trade out yet again. This time it's for the Talus, who ends up falling. But still, no big fights in the actual objective. Maybe now that headëd has found the kill onto divinö, and Clarity have to fully fall back, and Fatal Ambition win that first mid fight.
Yeah, they do that a lot, where they pretty much leave Luna on the point. Even though they start that bulldozer early, they just try and get picks, try and keep that aggression, so that way they can steamroll it into something that really, really can matter. That's why they lock that IO like every time, and why she had to get banned on so many of these different maps. But it's just so much pressure to try and deal with, man. It's just so much just to try and answer to, especially when Barik does a lot of damage on his own.
Barinoo able to find 2 kills of his own, and just like that, Fatal Ambition have already captured the objective. They're ready to start rolling this payload down the hill. Things can be difficult here on Ice Mines when they've got this much flank power here on their draft. They can get forward and start doing an aggressive zone. RCSoldier has forced his way all the way to the back line to try and buy his team some space, maybe find a kill, but Vindo a little bit too wily for that one. Has his head on a swivel, turns back. PS1 wins his battle as well up against Mika, so Clarity must retreat even further, and giving more ground over to Fatal Ambition.
Yeah, it is definitely. I mean, I've said it so many times, but at the same time, it just has the same potency every time, right? It's just hard to deal with, man. Like, I mean, this is the pressure. We had talked about it before when we were seeing these characters actually being drafted. It is just super, super hard to try and stop the Talus and Zhin, even if you try use the triple DPS to counter it all. I mean, I had mentioned it. The Barik is just a lot harder to deal with, and so is the Luna. It's harder to keep your attention on that Luna when you have 2 people running you down at all times, right? You have to be able to keep an eye on pretty much everything in this situation. You find opportunities like this and try and make it work, but he might even go down. He is actually just forced away from it, but they still get those picks.
Yeah, it works out for Pénny. They end up finding 2 on the back of his aggression heading forward on this Tiberius. And that's going to open things up finally for Team Clear to get a bit of breathing room of their own to play some defense. Pénny gets another. As Cools ends up dropping, as does Barinoo. So this will stall them out substantially here at this point. And what it's really starting to feel like here is that Fatal Ambition are using their pressure correctly. I mean, how quickly must Zhin have gotten that ultimate charged up? Because we saw one from him before they even got that first capture. I mean, clearly this poke war is working in Fatal Ambition's favor. All this additional pressure is allowing for this IO to thrive, and they work in all that space.
Yeah, it's RCSoldiers over here on the side trying to make sure he gets dismounts and just stall their way back to the payload. Like, he doesn't want to let them make sure that they can get in as easily as they can. Talus actually forces out the O, which is what's huge right there. May have been up a little bit too far, so that means that Koga doesn't have that sort of presence anymore. He actually gets picked off, and oh my goodness, the kills are just rolling forward for Fatal Ambition right now, just like the card is, since they just made it back to it.
Yeah, suddenly the kill feed's starting to light up red as Fatal Ambition get the near team wipe. This will have to happen in overtime if it happens at all now for Fatal Ambition, this conversion. The payload now close. They've sent Luna in to try and help out with that push a bit more, but this is good damage on the head, and he can't step out for a little bit longer to look for these shots. It would not be a favorable trade. So Vindo steps a bit further forward to find his damage. He's forced to retreat, but headëd gets the damage. Fatal Ambition get the push through. Once they lost divinö, that was all it took.
It was, but also Team Clarity, they were so pressured by the Strix that they actually didn't even step on the point. They just went up. A lot of their characters just went up into the high ground and tried to put pressure on them, trying to force them off and make sure they can get that pick. But by the time they had made it up there, like you said, divinö was gone. He was the one that was really holding down that payload, but since so many people were looking at him, he gets picked off at the right time for Fatal Ambition to make it a 2-0.
Yeah, I wonder if the plan was for the assert dominance to be used there so divinö could kind of buy a bit more time. I mean, even they were so close to getting that kill onto headëd, but he was able to fall back out of the sight line, heal back up a bit, and step back out, and that Strix pressure a little bit too much for everyone to want to step out and find the point touch. But either way, it's Fatal Ambition moving into this next mid-fight up 2-0. So the fast cap will be there for Clarity if they can find it, but PS1 and the boys want to try and get aggressive, already finding the favorable trade up against Mika. Doesn't get the kill, but divinö melts back on the point. RCSoldier has fallen as well, and suddenly Fatal Ambition in full control, up to 40% already, and PS1 wants to get aggressive. They don't even need him from Mika. That's headëd that gets that kill, but they're still not done. He's heading right to the back line. He's going to stop divinö from making his way in and finding a touch. That's the point where they convert the payload, already delaying him from finding a way in to contest this mid-fight.
I mean, you really do love to see it if you're on if you're a Fatal Ambition fan, or if you're just on Fatal Ambition's side at that point. They're just playing really, really well. They even sent people back to make sure that they couldn't push forward and try and get the pick like how they did last time on the Viktor, but they still got that and then some. Ash was actually able to be killed by that IO with the Begone off of the side of the map. That's what was important to remember there for sure, because of the fact that they're able to make sure they get these priority picks. They ignored one person, and that person was just the IO. That IO got that beginning pick on divinö, and they couldn't really stop it at that point.
Fatal Ambition now with all the momentum in the world you could ask for. The momentum in the set, the momentum in this actual map itself. Kill streaks on 4 members and 2 ultimates in the chamber, with 1 more not too far off from this Zhin. The payload continues to get closer. You don't normally have this much time, but
oh my goodness, dude!
All piled up in the corner. This is disaster. If you're on the side of Team Clarity, a nightmare now as Fatal Ambition run over the boys. That's it for the set. That's it for Ice Mines. Fatal Ambition clinch it.
Man, what a way. The minute I saw him dash all the way around the side, I was like, this is it. This is the shield he was saving for that point. Gets all 5 in there to the point to where Jenos has to use through time and space to get rid of it. But by that point, you're already where he wants you, right? Like you're already dead at that point. You already get taken care of by the people on Fatal Ambition. That dome shield gets dropped, and all off of that, the rest of Fatal Ambition see the opportunity and they clean it up, man. That was so well played by Barik.
Team Clarity looked great back on Stonekeep. I believe they won that first map, but since then, it has been all Fatal Ambition. On the back of this aggression, great play from headëd as well. I feel like on the Strix, whether it was on Splitstone or here on Ice Mines, PS1 had a great game there too. I want to talk a bit about Vindo and some of the Bomb King play that he was able to do here for this squad as well. Fatal Ambition really turned up the gas around this IO. I mean, that's what went wrong on Stonekeep, right? I mean, the IO just kind of was, the Luna was a sitting duck. They burned it, and then suddenly it felt like you wasted this IO pick. On every map since then, they established all this pressure from their flankers that made it so much stronger to be slowly capping the whole time.
Yeah, it's just so well done. That's sick to see
that's
that again. And dude, that is sick. That is big money plays for sure. Like that is exactly what you need to be able to have. But at that point, they had the momentum, and it was hard to stop them from rolling at that point. I mean, they were just able to keep so much on their back line. Every single time they play so much better this round, because every single time they try and put pressure on that Luna, somebody on the opposite side on Team Clarity got picked, because they knew how to adapt to situations like that. When they knew that Luna would be the primary focus, they were able to open up a lot of these lines of sight in the back line and keep that pressure going, which is why it was so efficient for them.
Well, it looks like Parallax got a big win over Carnage Gaming, so they'll control that spot up near the top. Meanwhile, because of In Control's win, they were able to get over Balamansa. They're right there now, tied at 5-2 with Carnage. It's only the map differential, that plus-minus, it looks like, that's really coming in between. And Fatal Ambition, now with some good space between them and the bottom of the league in that 4th spot on the back of their win there, Fawn. So things here in Brazil really starting to heat up. There's a couple teams like Clarity and Balamansa that I think that have been left behind, but everyone else at any given moment, it looks like, could just take a map off anyone else.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was really, really efficient back and forth too. And even though Team Clarity lost, it's important to see that they were still trying to give Fatal Ambition a run for their money, which was just so potent and hard to deal with. You had this back and forth at least for one game, but once Fatal Ambition really showed up, they showed up in a big way, and they made it hard for them to stop once they had that momentum throughout that set.
I think what we saw was the importance of not just picks and bans, not just drafting, but then taking that same mentality from your draft into the actual map, right? It's that if you are going to be drafting all these flankers, if you're going to be drafting that single frontliner and kind of leaving them alone on an island in that center of the map, then you got to make sure that you're pulling eyes off them, that you're making the other team answer too many problems all at once here, Fawn, or else you might not be able to slow that down. So that's going to do it here for Brazil. It's going to do it for me as well. Give us a little bit of time. We're getting this ready for North America to close out here with Paladins. Make sure you're right back here on the other side of this break.